Welcome to Revenge by Eve. Thanks for joining us. Relax and enjoy today's tale.
I sat at my sister's graduation dinner watching my entire family celebrate her achievements while they hadn't even noticed I'd published my first novel 3 months earlier. And that was the night I decided to disappear from their lives completely. Before this story goes any further, tell me, would you have given them one more chance or done what I did? And as you listen, comment where you're listening from. I read everyone. My name is Eve Hartley, and I grew up as the middle child in a family of 5. My older sister Claire was the golden child. Brilliant, beautiful, effortlessly successful at everything she touched. She was valedictorian, homecoming queen, star of the debate team. She had that kind of magnetic personality that made everyone in a room gravitate toward her. My younger brother Nathan was the baby, the cherished son. I'm the one my parents had tried for after having 2 daughters. He was athletic, charming, and could get away with anything because he had that little boy's smile that made my parents melt. And then there was me, the middle, the one who existed somewhere between exceptional and adored, occupying a space that felt increasingly like no space at all. We lived in a comfortable home in the suburbs. My father was a cardiologist, my mother a former elementary school teacher who'd stopped working when Nathan was born. We weren't wealthy, but we were secure. Piano lessons, family vacations, college funds, all the markers of an upper-middle-class childhood. From the outside, we looked perfect. The Hartley family, successful, close-knit, enviable. But perfection has a way of requiring sacrifices. And I was the sacrifice no one acknowledged making. I noticed it early, though I didn't have the language to articulate it. The way my parents' eyes would light up when Claire walked into a room, the way their voices would soften when Nathan needed something, and the way their attention would slide past me, pleasant but unfocused, like I was a piece of furniture they'd long since stopped noticing. I tried to earn their attention the way any child does. I brought home good grades, not perfect like Claire's, but solid A's and B's. I joined activities, not star positions like Claire had, but I participated. I helped around the house without being asked. I stayed out of trouble. I was the easy child. And being easy, I learned, meant being invisible. Dinner time was when it was most obvious. We'd sit around the table and my parents would ask Claire about her day, her college applications, and her latest academic achievement. They'd ask Nathan about his soccer games, his friends, his plans for the weekend, and then they'd turn to me with a distracted smile. "And how was your day, Eve?" "Good. I got an A on my history paper." "That's nice, honey." And the conversation would immediately shift back to Claire's scholarship opportunities or Nathan's tournament schedule. I told myself it was normal. Claire was older, more accomplished. Nathan was younger, needed more attention. I was just in the middle. That's how middle children were, right? Overlooked but loved. I believed that for a long time. I found solace in books. I'd always been a reader, but during middle school and high school, books became my refuge. I'd spend hours in my room, disappearing into other worlds, other families, other versions of what love could look like. And eventually, I started writing my own stories. It started as a hobby, a way to process feelings I didn't know how to express. I'd write about characters who felt invisible, who longed to be seen, who eventually found their place in the world. The stories were therapeutic, even if no one ever read them. My English teacher noticed. Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside after class one day during my sophomore year. "Eve, you have real talent. Have you thought about pursuing writing seriously?" No one had ever called me talented before. "I don't know," I said, feeling simultaneously thrilled and embarrassed. "It's just something I do for fun." "It could be more than that. You should enter some competitions, maybe look at creative writing programs for college." The idea took root. For the first time, I had something that was mine. Not an attempt to match Claire's achievements or compete for attention with Nathan. Just mine. I started entering writing contests. I joined the school literary magazine. I spent my weekends at coffee shops, writing and revising, and dreaming about becoming an author. When I told my family about my interest in creative writing, the response was lukewarm at best. "That's a nice hobby," my mother said, "but you should think about something more practical for college." "Writing is practical," I insisted. "People make careers out of it." My father chuckled. "A very small percentage of people. You're smart, Eve. You could do something stable, something with a real future." Claire was planning to go to medical school. Nathan, even as a middle schooler, was already being scouted for soccer scholarships, and I wanted to write stories. It felt frivolous by comparison, silly, a childish dream that I should outgrow. But I didn't outgrow it. I held on to it fiercely, even as I applied to colleges with practical majors to appease my parents. I was accepted to a decent state university, and I told my parents I was majoring in communications, which was true, but I double majored in creative writing without mentioning it. They didn't ask for details. They were too busy planning Claire's graduation party and Nathan's travel soccer schedule. The warning signs that I was truly invisible became impossible to ignore during my college years. I came home for Thanksgiving my freshman year, excited to share that I'd won a university writing competition. The prize was $500 and publication in the school's prestigious literary journal. It was the first time I'd won something meaningful, something that validated all those hours I'd spent alone with my laptop. I announced it at Thanksgiving dinner, my voice bright with pride. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, passing the potatoes. "Claire, tell everyone about your anatomy class." Claire launched into a story about cadaver dissection, and the conversation moved on. No one asked to read my winning story. No one asked what the competition had been about. No one seemed to register that I'd accomplished something significant. I sat there, the words I'd prepared about my story dying in my throat, and I felt something crack inside my chest. That Christmas, I came home to find that my childhood bedroom had been converted into a home gym. My parents had moved my stuff, books, clothes, photographs, into boxes in the garage. We figured since you're away at college now, we could use the space," my mother explained. "You don't mind, do you? You can sleep on the pull-out couch when you visit." Claire's room was still intact, preserved like a shrine to her high school glory. Nathan's room was exactly as he'd left it. But mine, erased. "I would have liked to be asked," I said quietly. "Oh, Eve, don't be sensitive, it's just practical. You're barely home anymore anyway." I spent that holiday sleeping on a couch that hurt my back, surrounded by my family but feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my dorm room. The pattern continued. I'd come home for breaks and holidays, and I'd sit through dinners where Claire's medical school achievements were dissected in detail, where Nathan's soccer highlights were rewatched and celebrated, where I was asked perfunctory questions before the conversation moved on to more interesting topics. I started coming home less. I'd make excuses about having to work, having projects due, having plans with friends. It was easier to avoid the pain of being overlooked than to keep subjecting myself to it. My junior year, I had a short story accepted by a small but respected literary magazine. It was my first professional publication, a huge milestone in my writing journey. I was so excited I could barely contain it. I called my mother to tell her, "That's great, sweetie. Listen, I can't talk long. I'm helping Claire study for her boards, but I'm proud of you." She hung up before I could tell her the story would be published with my full name, that I'd be paid for it, that this was the beginning of what I hoped would be my career. And I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, and I realized something painful. My accomplishments only mattered to my family when they were convenient, when they didn't compete for attention with Claire or Nathan, when they could be acknowledged with a quick "that's nice" before moving on to more important things. I was a supporting character in my own family's story. Things escalated during my senior year of college. I'd been working on a novel for 2 years, a young adult book about a girl who feels invisible in her family and finds her voice through art. It was deeply personal, cathartic, and the best thing I'd ever written. I queried literary agents, got rejected dozens of times, kept revising, kept trying. And then, miraculously, an agent offered representation. a good agent at a reputable agency. Within 3 months, we had a publishing deal, a real legitimate publishing deal with a major publisher, an advance, a publication date, marketing plans. Everything I'd dreamed about was suddenly real. I was 22 years old and I was going to be a published novelist. I drove home to tell my family in person. This felt too big for a phone call. This was the moment when they'd finally see me, finally recognize that I'd accomplished something extraordinary. I arrived on a Saturday afternoon. Claire was home from medical school for the weekend. Nathan was there with his girlfriend. Perfect. Everyone together. I walked in, barely able to contain my excitement. "I have big news," I announced. My family looked up from the living room where they'd been watching one of Nathan's soccer games on video. "What's up?" my father asked. "I got a book deal. I'm going to be published. My novel is coming out next fall with Harrison House Publishing." There was a beat of silence. "That's great, Eve," my mother said, smiling. "Congratulations." "Harrison House is one of the big publishers," I pressed, needing them to understand the significance. "This is a real deal. I'm going to be an actual author." "We're proud of you," my father said. "That must have taken a lot of work." "It did. 2 years of writing and revising and querying and—" "Oh," my mother interrupted, turning to Claire. "That reminds me. Did you hear back from that residency program?" And just like that, the conversation shifted. Claire launched into a detailed explanation of her residency applications, and my book deal became a footnote. An interruption quickly glossed over so we could return to more important matters. I stood there, invisible again, and felt something inside me go numb. That evening, Nathan's girlfriend asked me about the book. "What's it about?" she asked kindly. Finally, someone was interested. I started explaining the plot, the themes, why I'd written it. "That sounds really personal," she said. "Is it based on your life?" "Some of it." "Nathan, didn't you say you have that tournament next weekend?" my mother called from the kitchen, and Nathan's girlfriend turned away to listen to his response. I stopped talking mid-sentence. No one noticed. Later that night, I overheard my parents talking in their bedroom. I was walking past on my way to the bathroom when I heard my name. "I worry about Eve," my mother was saying. "She's so focused on this writing thing. I hope she has a backup plan." "She's always been in her own world," my father replied. "Remember how she used to spend all that time in her room reading instead of doing something productive?" "I just don't want her to struggle. Writing isn't a stable career. Look at Claire. She's going to be a doctor. Nathan has those scholarship offers. But Eve, she'll figure it out. She's smart enough. She just needs to be more realistic about her future." I stood in the hallway listening to my parents discuss my life like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person who'd just achieved something remarkable. I went back to college the next day without saying goodbye. The book came out 10 months later. The launch was modest but exciting. My publisher organised a reading at a bookstore in the city where I'd gotten my first job after graduation. I'd invited my family weeks in advance. I'd sent them the book details, the event information, told them how much it would mean to me if they came. Launch day arrived. I stood in that bookstore looking out at the crowd that had gathered, friends, co-workers, a few fans who'd heard about the book through early reviews. My family wasn't there. I kept watching the door, hoping they were just running late. But the reading started, and the seats they should have occupied stayed empty. I read from my novel, answered questions, signed books, and the whole time there was a hollow ache in my chest where my family's presence should have been. After the event, I checked my phone. One text from my mother. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Nathan had a game and Claire had a big exam to study for. Congrats on the book." Nathan had games every weekend. But Claire always had exams. There would always be a reason why something else was more important. I'd published a novel, something most writers spend their entire lives dreaming about, and my family couldn't spare 2 hours to celebrate with me. That was when I started to realise something. This wasn't going to change. There wasn't going to be a moment when they suddenly saw me. There wasn't going to be a grand recognition of all I'd accomplished. There was just going to be more of the same, my achievements minimized, my presence taken for granted, my absence unnoticed. I went home that night and cried for hours. Not sad tears, angry tears, years of accumulated hurt and disappointment pouring out of me. And when the tears stopped, I felt something else. Clarity. 3 months after my book launch, my sister Claire finished her residency and got engaged to a successful neurosurgeon she'd met at the hospital. The engagement party was at my parents' house, a huge celebration with extended family, friends, colleagues. My parents had gone all out, catered food, professional decorations, a photographer to document every moment. I drove 3 hours to attend because family obligation was still a habit I couldn't quite break. When I arrived, I was greeted with the usual perfunctory hugs. My mother was bustling around, making sure everything was perfect. My father was playing host, introducing Claire's fiancé to everyone. The party was in full swing when I approached the table where family photos were displayed. A timeline of Claire's life, from childhood to medical school graduation to engagement. Next to those photos was a table with family albums open to pages of Claire and Nathan's achievements. Soccer trophies, academic awards, newspaper clippings about their accomplishments, and nothing of mine. Not my writing awards from high school, not my college literary magazine features, not even a copy of my published novel. I stood there, staring at that table, and something inside me finally, irrevocably, broke. During the speeches, family members took turns toasting Claire. My father gave a long, emotional speech about how proud he was, how he'd always known she'd do extraordinary things, how she'd exceeded every expectation. When it was my turn to say something, because someone eventually noticed the middle daughter standing awkwardly in the corner, I kept it brief. Congratulations, Claire. I wish you all the happiness you deserve. After the speeches, I found myself standing alone near the kitchen when my mother approached me. "Isn't this wonderful?" she said, beaming. "I'm so happy for your sister." "It's a beautiful party," I said. "You know, Eve, I was thinking, maybe seeing Claire so settled will inspire you to focus more on your own future. You're 24 now. It's time to think about a real career, maybe meeting someone." The words hit me like a slap. "A real career," I repeated slowly. "You mean like publishing a novel? Like building a writing career? Like the thing I've been doing?" "Oh, honey, you know what I mean. Writing is wonderful as a hobby, but you need something stable. Something you can build a life on." "I am building a life. I'm doing exactly what I've always wanted to do." She patted my arm. "I know you think that now, but trust me, you'll understand when you're older. Claire made practical choices and look how well things turned out for her." I stared at my mother, this woman who'd raised me but had never truly seen me, and I felt something click into place. She wasn't ever going to see me. None of them were. Because they'd decided long ago who I was, the impractical middle child with unrealistic dreams. And no amount of achievement was going to change that narrative. I left the party early, claiming I had work in the morning. No one tried particularly hard to convince me to stay. I drove home in silence and, for the first time in my life, I felt completely certain about what I needed to do. That was the moment I stopped waiting for them to change. I didn't make any dramatic announcements. I didn't send angry texts or write long emails explaining my hurt. I simply started pulling away, quietly and deliberately. I stopped calling every week. I stopped coming home for every holiday. I stopped sharing my accomplishments, my struggles, my life. When my mother called to check in, I kept conversations brief and surface level. "Work is fine, I'm good. How's everyone?" And I'd listen to 20 minutes about Claire's wedding planning or Nathan's new job before making an excuse to hang up. I stopped posting on social media about my writing. I stopped trying to make them understand why my work mattered. I just stopped trying. And you know what I realized? They barely noticed. 3 months went by before my mother mentioned that I'd been distant lately. I told her I was busy with work. She accepted the explanation without digging deeper. I was conducting an experiment. How long would it take for my family to realize I was disappearing? How long before someone asked why I wasn't coming around anymore? I waited 6 months for someone to push past my surface-level responses and ask if something was wrong. No one did. During this time, my writing career was actually flourishing. My first novel had done well enough that my publisher wanted a second book. I was getting invited to speak at events, doing interviews, building an audience of readers who actually cared about my stories. I had created a life where I was seen and valued. And the more time I spent in that life, the more painful it became to return to a family where I was neither. So I made a decision. I decided to walk away completely. Not in anger, I'd processed that already, but in self-preservation. I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself to people who didn't value what they were receiving. I planned it carefully. I wasn't going to disappear overnight because that would create drama and make me the villain. Instead, I was going to fade so gradually that by the time they realized I was gone, I'd already built a life that didn't need them. The plan was simple. I became unavailable. Thanksgiving? I had a work deadline. Christmas? I was traveling for research. Claire's wedding? I had a book tour scheduled that I absolutely couldn't reschedule. The excuses were legitimate enough that no one questioned them too hard. And the truth was, I did have work commitments. I just also could have rearranged them if I'd wanted to. I didn't want to. I stopped responding to family group texts immediately. I'd wait a day or two, then send a brief reply. I stopped initiating conversations entirely. I let every relationship exist only to the extent that someone else maintained it. And I watched as, one by one, those connections weakened from neglect. What surprised me was how little effort my family put into maintaining contact with me. If I didn't reach out, weeks would go by without anyone checking in. My mother would call occasionally, but the conversations were always about what was happening with Claire or Nathan, never about me. I also started building distance physically. I'd been living 3 hours from my hometown. I applied for jobs in other cities, and when I got an offer in Seattle, across the country, I took it. I told my family I was moving during a brief phone call. "Go Seattle?" my mother said, surprised. "That's so far away." "It's a great opportunity, but you'll miss so much. Claire's wedding, Nathan's games. I'll visit when I can." I wouldn't visit. We both knew it. But she didn't fight me on it, and I think part of her was relieved. The daughter who'd become unexpectedly complicated, who didn't fit neatly into the family narrative, would be far enough away that her absence wouldn't disrupt anything. I moved to Seattle without much fanfare. My family sent a few texts wishing me luck. No one offered to help me move. No one visited in the first few months to see my new apartment. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I built a completely new life. I found a community of writers who understood and valued what I did. I made friends who actually asked about my work and celebrated my successes. And I dated someone who read my books and understood why they mattered to me. I became visible again, just not to my family. A year and a half after I moved to Seattle, my second novel was published. It debuted on the bestseller list. I posted the news on social media with a picture of me holding the book in front of the Seattle skyline. The post got hundreds of congratulatory comments from readers, writer friends, industry professionals. My family's response? My mother commented, "So proud," with a heart emoji. That was it. No phone call. No questions about how it felt to be a best-selling author. No acknowledgement that this was a massive achievement. Just a generic comment that could have been left on anyone's post about anything. I stared at that comment for a long time, and I felt nothing. No hurt. No anger. Just a calm confirmation that I'd made the right choice in walking away. 2 weeks later, my mother called. "Eve, we haven't seen you in almost 2 years. When are you coming home?" "I don't know, Mom. I'm pretty busy with work." You're always busy with work. Family should come first. The irony was staggering. Mom, did you know my book is on the bestseller list? Oh yes, I saw that on Facebook. That's wonderful, honey. Your father and I are very proud. Have you read it? Silence. We've been meaning to. It's just been so busy with Claire's wedding planning and Nathan just bought a house and… It's been out for 2 weeks. I know, sweetheart. We'll definitely read it soon. They wouldn't. The book was on the New York Times bestseller list, and my parents couldn't be bothered to read it. Listen, Mom, I need to go. I have a call with my agent. Okay. But seriously, Eve, you need to come visit. The family misses you. Did they? Did they really miss me? Or did they just notice the absence of a supporting player in their family production? After we hung up, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not a story, a list. Every significant moment in my life over the past 10 years. Every accomplishment my family had dismissed or ignored. Every time I'd been made to feel invisible. I filled 5 pages, and then I wrote one more thing at the bottom of the last page. I owe them nothing. The payoff came unexpectedly, at an event I hadn't planned to attend. My publisher was throwing a party for their best-selling authors, and I almost declined. I don't love big industry events. Too much schmoozing, too much performance. But my agent convinced me to go. You need to be visible in this industry, she said. Network, make connections. This is part of the job. So I went, wearing a dress that made me feel confident, ready to make small talk and pretend I enjoyed these things. I was talking to another author when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Eve? Eve Hartley? I turned around and found myself face to face with my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. She lived across the country and I hadn't seen her in probably 5 years. Aunt Linda, what are you doing here? My boss invited me. She's a big reader and has connections at the publisher. I had no idea you'd be here. She pulled me into a hug. Look at you, a best-selling author. I saw your book in the airport and couldn't believe it. I bought it immediately and read it on the plane. Eve? It's incredible. Someone in my family had actually read my book. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. I told your mother she absolutely has to read it, but she said she hadn't gotten around to it yet. Linda's expression shifted slightly. Between you and me, I think she doesn't understand what a big deal this is. She doesn't, I said quietly. Linda studied my face. You've been distant from the family lately. I noticed at Claire's engagement party, you left early and you seemed… different. I considered giving her a polite non-answer, but something about the way she was looking at me, actually seeing me, made me honest. I've been distant because I finally realized I don't exist to them. Not really. I'm just background noise in the story of Claire and Nathan's lives. Linda didn't immediately contradict me, which told me she'd noticed the same things I had. That must be incredibly painful, she said. It was, for a long time. But I've made peace with it. I've built a life here, Aunt Linda. A real life with people who see me and value me. And I don't need my family's approval anymore. Have you told them how you feel? Would it matter? They've had 25 years to notice me. They chose not to. Linda was quiet for a moment. You know, I always thought your mother was too focused on Claire and Nathan. I mentioned it once and she got defensive. Said I didn't understand the demands of raising children. But I saw it, Eve. The way they overlooked you. And I'm sorry I never said something more forcefully. It's not your responsibility. Maybe not, but I'm still sorry. We talked for another hour. She wanted to know everything about my writing career, my life in Seattle, what I was working on next. It was the conversation I'd always wanted to have with my parents but never had. As the event wound down, Linda hugged me goodbye. I know I'm not your mother, she said, but I'm proud of you. What you've built, who you've become, it's remarkable. And if you ever need family who actually shows up, I'm here. I cried in the Uber on the way home. Not sad tears, grateful ones, because Linda had given me something I'd stopped expecting from my family. Recognition. The real fallout came 3 months later. Claire got married in a lavish ceremony I didn't attend. I sent a generous gift and a card with my congratulations, but I used work commitments as an excuse not to fly across the country for the wedding. My mother called me after the ceremony, hurt in her voice. Everyone was asking where you were. I had to keep explaining that you were too busy with work to come to your own sister's wedding. I was too busy. Eve, this is Claire's wedding. You couldn't have taken one weekend off? Something in me snapped. Mum, did you read my book yet? What does that have to do with... It's been 6 months since it came out, 6 months since it hit the bestseller list. Have you read it? Silence. That's what I thought. Eve, that's not fair. You know how busy... Do you know what the book is about, Mom? It's a young adult novel, right? About a girl? It's about a girl who's invisible to her family, who spends her whole life trying to earn their love and attention, only to realize they're never going to give it to her. It's about what happens when she finally stops trying and walks away. More silence. Are you saying this is about us? I'm saying I wrote what I knew. And what I know is that I've never been a priority in this family. I've spent 25 years being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like an afterthought. And I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt. That's not true. We love you. You love the idea of me. The daughter who doesn't cause problems, who doesn't need much attention, but you don't actually know me. You don't know what I care about, what I've accomplished, what my life looks like, because you've never bothered to ask. Eve, you're being unfair. We've always supported you. When? When have you supported me? You didn't come to my book launch. You didn't read my novel. You didn't notice when I stopped coming home. You barely noticed when I moved across the country. My mother was crying now. I didn't know you felt this way. Because you never asked, and now it's too late. I'm not doing this anymore, Mum. I'm not trying to earn your attention or fit into your idea of who I should be. I'm living my life and you're not a part of it. You're cutting us out. Your own family. No. You cut me out years ago. I'm just making it official. I hung up before she could respond. The aftermath was messy in the way endings always are. My father called. My siblings called. Extended family members I barely knew sent concerned messages. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, why I was being so dramatic, why I couldn't just forgive and move on. But here's the thing about being invisible for most of your life. When you finally demand to be seen, people accuse you of seeking attention. My mother sent a long email detailing all the ways they'd supported me over the years. The email read like a list of basic parenting duties: feeding me, housing me, paying for my education, as if those things were extraordinary acts of love rather than baseline obligations. She didn't mention a single specific accomplishment of mine. She couldn't, because she didn't know them. Claire called, angry. You're tearing this family apart over your hurt feelings. Do you know what you're doing to Mom? I'm setting a boundary, that's all. You're being selfish. Maybe, but I'd rather be selfish than invisible. Nathan didn't call at all, which told me everything I needed to know about how much my presence in his life had mattered. Aunt Linda, however, stayed in touch. We talked regularly, and she became the family connection I'd always wanted. Someone who actually cared about my life and celebrated my successes. 6 months after that phone call with my mother, my family stopped reaching out. I think they'd expected me to cave, to apologize, to come back and resume my role as the overlooked middle child. When I didn't, they moved on. The family narrative adjusted to my absence, and life continued without me. And I was okay with that. Better than okay, actually. I was free. 2 years after I walked away, my third novel was published. It was my best work yet, a story about family, belonging, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. It resonated with readers in a way I'd never experienced before. The reviews were glowing. The sales exceeded expectations. I did interviews, podcasts, book tours, and everywhere I went, people told me stories about their own families, their own experiences of being invisible, their own journeys to claiming their worth. I realized my story wasn't unique. There were thousands, maybe millions of people who'd felt what I felt, who'd been treated the way I'd been treated. And by sharing my experience through fiction, I was giving them permission to acknowledge their own pain, to stop pretending everything was fine, to choose themselves. That was more meaningful than any acknowledgement from my family could ever have been. I built a life that was full and rich and entirely mine. I had a partner who read everything I wrote and understood why it mattered. I had friends who showed up for my book launches and celebrated every milestone. I had a career I loved and readers who valued my work. I had everything I'd ever wanted, or except the approval of people who'd never been capable of giving it, and I was genuinely, authentically happy. Last month, I received a letter from my mother. It was handwritten, 6 pages long, and it arrived at my publisher's office because she didn't have my current address. In the letter, she apologized. She said she'd finally read all 3 of my books, that she'd seen herself in the parents I'd written, and that she was devastated by the realization of how badly she'd failed me. She said she understood why I'd walked away, that she didn't blame me, but that she hoped someday I might be willing to talk to her again. She said she was proud of me, that she'd always been proud, even if she'd never known how to show it. That she was sorry for all the moments she'd missed, all the achievements she'd dismissed, all the times she'd made me feel invisible. The letter was raw and honest in a way my mother had never been with me before. I read it 3 times, sitting in my sunny Seattle apartment with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, and then I put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'll respond. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have that conversation to see if there's a relationship worth rebuilding. But not today. Today, I'm still learning to take up space in my own life without apologizing for it. I'm still learning that I don't need to earn love, that my worth isn't measured by someone else's attention. I'm still learning to be visible to myself first. And that's enough. If you were in my place, what would you have done differently? And don't forget to tell me, where are you listening from right now? This is Revenge by Eve, and your voice matters here.
Thanks for watching Revenge by Eve. Until next time, relax and see you soon.